I would like to introduce our speakers today, Dr. Brick Lance and PhD Jim Schultz. Dr. Brick Lance is an orthopedic surgeon, a member of the Christian Medical Dental Association, serves on the board for the Dove Medical Center, a pregnancy resource center in Eugene, Oregon, and most importantly, he is passionate about the engaging churches in the movement. Next, you'll hear from, or should I? Yep, okay. I'm just going to introduce Jim Schultz next as well. So you'll hear from Jim Schultz. He's a pro-life apologist, pastor, and author. In addition to engaging his congregation in the pro-life movement for 18 years, he also founded a pregnancy resource center in Brookings, served on their board, and is currently on the board of Oregon Right to Life. And he's accompanied with his two daughters today, Jamie and Daphne. Welcome to the stage, Dr. Brick Lance.
Thank you. I think this one will work. Can everybody hear me? Am I on? Excellent. All right, this is one of my passions, so thank you for welcoming me here. I love to speak on engaging the church because I find it so vitally important for all kinds of issues that involve truth, particularly the truth of what the unborn is. I mean, it's life, and we need to support life. I am the medical director, which seems strange, an orthopedic surgeon being medical director of a pregnancy resource center, but it's a passion of mine. I love it. I have OB-GYNs and family practice doctors, licensed ultrasonographers, nurses that run the show. I just have the privilege of handling all the critiques that come our way, which from one side, as you can imagine, is quite many in Eugene, Oregon. So I am on actually the national board of CMDA, Christian Medical Dental Association. It's the largest Christian healthcare organization in the world. Multiple ministries under that. You can imagine missions. There's student chapters on over 300 medical schools across the country. There's a learning center. There's over 50 ministries under the umbrella of CMDA. And one, of course, is advocacy. And I was just talking to our ADF attorney right now. He is the one handling the case for us. We just sued the state of California, and he's representing us. I didn't realize it was him, so that was fun. We sued the state of California because they just passed a law that all physicians must refer for abortion. All physicians. And so that will be in the courts for a while, I imagine. So we're involved in advocacy, just like Oregon Right to Life. I'm also the state representative for AAME, that's the American Academy of Medical Ethics. I saw our Washington State delegate is also speaking right now, so Dr. Sharon Quick. So that is an advocacy group about medical ethics. And then, as I said, not only a board member, actually the medical director of Dove Medical. And I believe in advocacy. It's not my passion. I've been asked to testify before Senate hearings here in the state of Oregon. In fact, been there with William Toffler a couple of times. And I'll do it because I like speaking the truth. That's what I like doing. But engaging the church for life. So let's go to the next slide. So this together, I love the theme. And of course, this is not all inclusive, but all of us are in this together. All right? We're all in this together. It's interesting how an organization can kind of get secluded and feel like they're the only ones involved. We need to encourage each other. All these organizations need to encourage each other. Here's a microcosm of this. I also lead a student chapter at the University of Oregon for pre-health, pre-medical students. And so what I do on campus, once a quarter, I invite all the parachurch campus ministers. As you could imagine, I can name them off: InterVarsity, Navigators, Young Life, all those organizations, college. We get together just once a quarter to pray for each other. Because you're so involved in your ministry, you don't know what the work of the other is doing, and simply just for a matter of prayer. So let's encourage one another. So why is the church so important in upholding the value of life? Well, if you think about it, what did God create? Well, in the beginning, we're imago Dei. We are created by God. We're created by God in his image. What also did God create? He created the church, all right? So the church is fundamental in upholding imago Dei. And next. So I always like to ask this question. I ask this to my students that I work with. Of all the cultural institutions that can uphold the value of life, which is most valuable and why? And we can talk about government, certainly important. Education, our schools, absolutely important. You just heard that from the attorneys. Media, important. There's some wonderful Christian media that portrays the sanctity of life, entertainment, healthcare. But I would claim none of those are as important as the church and the family. All right? And I'll allude to that a little bit later, but the church is vitally important. So next, these are my 8 E's: economic, energy, encouragement, empathy, education, equip, engage, evangelize. And they're all these are listed on the handout, by the way. And I'm going to go through these one at a time. I'm going to be kind of quick here. Economic. These organizations require money, all right? So feel free to donate. I know many of you do. Encourage others to donate. I would encourage you, go to the fundraisers. A lot of these organizations I listed have fundraisers within the state of Oregon. Invite people to go. Use word of mouth, and let's support them financially. Very important. Now, again, I'm speaking to the choir here, but the pact that we have in Oregon is so vitally important. And I don't know if Lois has mentioned this. I know she mentioned it in all of her emails. This is free money, you guys. This is free if you understand that. You have $50 individual, $100 a couple to take off your taxes to give to Oregon Right to Life. You're going to pay the money. If you don't pay it to the PAC, you're paying it to the state of Oregon. All right? So pretty clear there. I won't belabor that. Okay, next. What's that? Oh, and it's on Smile. Yes, very good. Thank you. Energy, time, and commitment. You know, our most valued commodity is not money, it's our time. And our time is given us to by God. Sometimes I personally find it's one of the most difficult possessions for me to give. But we need to pray about giving of our time. You ever ask yourself, I know I ask myself this question, not infrequently, why did God place me at this point in time in history and this place in history? God is sovereign, he's got a reason. So let's use our energy and our time. Encouragement is the next E. We need to encourage our pastors, we need to encourage our elders, our priests, our church staff, and our church members. I need to do that more. I need to speak words of encouragement, email words of encouragement, write letters. We need to support the church. Being a pastor or a priest is not an easy job. And we as the church parishioners need to do a better job. I need to do a better job of encouragement. And I need to say thank you to them more often. Just thank you for being a leader. All right, that's one way to engage the church. Next is empathy. You know, there's so many lives that are affected by abortion. So, you know, if you sit in a congregation, moderate-sized congregation, statistics are 1 out of 4 women in your congregation that are the ages 18 to 40 have had an abortion. So it's true within a church as within the community, 1 in 4, all right? We need to have empathy for those women and men and relatives that have been affected by abortion. Next, education. We need to educate ourselves. That's why you're here today. We need to educate others. And I do want to mention Bridging the Gap. I have some more flyers of this out at my little table out there that Lois was able to grant me, which is wonderful. Bridging the Gap is a curriculum. It's free. It's online, CMDA's website. You can grab a little flyer. There's more out there if you want. It is a question and answer curriculum, 8 modules. One of the modules is beginning of life, one module is end of life, but 8 modules for a small group church to go through. So it's a Q&A, you ask the questions, have discussion, then CMDA provides an answer. It's a wonderful way to get this type of material within the church. I would encourage you to peruse it. Again, it's free online. How else about education? If you're in church, I would encourage you to start a book club, all right? I've actually done it in my secular office with other Christian members who go attend a variety of churches. And I'll tell you, here's some of my favorites. Pick a book. Now, I know I'm going to speak again to the choir here, but Randy Alcorn's book, this is the classic. You can come up with at least pro-life answers to pro-choice arguments, and here's his little booklet, so you can do either one. So Randy Alcorn, who lives here in Portland, wonderful. This is written by a friend of mine, wonderful book. It's a OB-GYN who used to practice abortion, who now has become a believer and loves the Lord and speaks for life, but unexpected choice. Again, I'll leave these up here. Why the Church Needs Bioethics, great book. My CEO of CMDA, we want to write a new book, Why Bioethics Needs the Church, all right? This is a book I just read recently, and I love it. Tactics, okay, by Greg Koukl. Just a wonderful book to have winsome conversations with those that think differently than you, which is what we should be engaged in. So a wonderful book on that. Be involved with Oregon Right to Life and policy. Be educated on those as well. Vote, it's very important. Encourage those in your church to vote. It's interesting, I have the opportunity as a physician to travel the world doing mission work, and I go to Eastern Europe, Serbia most recently. As I said here, for 18 to 40-year-old women, 1 out of 4 have had an abortion. In Eastern Europe, you flip the numerator denominator, as you heard in that last talk, okay? So there is, actually, let me say that again. In the United States, there's basically 1 abortion per 4 live births, okay? 1 abortion per 4 live births. In Eastern Europe, all of Eastern Europe, there's 4 abortions per 1 live birth, all right? So this is a worldwide issue. Equip. There's lots of ways to equip the church. You know, all kinds of educational supply. You see out there fetal models and other things. Your pregnancy resource center needs all kinds of supplies, clothes, food, infant care. And we talked already about those little lapel pins. I wear those at work, the little baby feet. I'm sure you've all seen them. It's a great conversation starter. Engage is the next E. Engage God. You ought to be engaging God on a regular basis through prayer and scripture. Engage your church with fellowship and teaching. Be an advocate within your church about the pro-life community. And then engage the world. And I could tell you all kinds of issues there. You know, there's a Students for Choice on University of Oregon, and as you can imagine, what kind of organization. I've reached out to the leader multiple times, said, let's get together for lunch. I want to listen. I want to hear what you have to say. And unfortunately, I've been turned down. It was interesting. There's a national organization, Advocates for Youth. I don't know if you've heard of that. It's a very left-wing, ultra-liberal, radical organization. And one evening, I got on their email list because I try to get on these guys' email lists. I'm a little bit sick in that way. But I get on their email list, and they were having a training session all over the United States, how to teach youth to write bad reviews for Pregnancy Resource Center, all right? Even though they've never been there or don't even know about it, but there was a training session. So I emailed the president. We had this very friendly email back and forth. I finally, I don't know if I convinced her of much, but said, you know, our pregnancy center doesn't do what you say. And she goes, okay, maybe yours is different. And anyway, engage the world and be willing to listen. Sometimes it's difficult, all right? Sometimes it's not easy, but I would encourage you to engage the world. And I have to tell this one story, which is really sad. So this is a mainline Protestant church in Eugene, Oregon, that was having a session for parents that have children in the youth department. And there's probably 100 parents, and the guest speaker, it was on sexuality. The guest speaker was the state president of Planned Parenthood. So she spoke about how healthy it was for your teenagers to have sex. And the youth pastor then gets up, and that's why I provide condoms for your children. This is a spiritual battle, folks. If that doesn't wake you up, I took brothers in Christ. I didn't have a kid there, so I couldn't speak up, but not a single parent rose their hand. We need to engage the church because the culture is influencing the church, and we need to reverse that. The church needs to engage the culture and change the culture. Evangelize. The Sanctity of Life message contains the gospel message. It is in there, all right? When you think of Imago Dei, the gospel message is creation, the fall, redemption through the Christ and resurrection of Christ, and then the restoration, which is happening now and will be fulfilled with the return of Christ. That is the gospel message. So people often ask me, particularly in the medical field, they said, oh, you were the medical director for Dove Medical, so you're not pro-choice, are you? And I respond, I'm very pro-choice. And it catches them off guard, and they go, why? This comes from the book of Tactics. You throw little pebbles in their shoe to make them think, all right? So they say why. They're asking the question, not me. I have the opportunity to share the gospel message. Well, I'm pro-choice because God created me that way. In fact, he created you that way. You know, unfortunately, I've made very bad, very poor decisions in the past. I've made wrong decisions. But God, through his forgiveness in Christ, is teaching me now how to make good and wise decisions. So I use the opportunity of the sanctity of life to share the gospel message. And there's multiple ways to do that. Okay, the next is, I think we're at the 8 E's. After row. So on the left coast here, so Washington, Oregon, California, You heard the attorneys speak, and they have a national perspective. I will tell you, as a physician, we are being inundated with requests not only for abortion, but particularly the oral abortifacient, okay? Because we're gonna be legal still up until full term here in Oregon, California, and Washington. We need to prepare. The church needs to be prepared for this. You need to warn your leaders of the church to be prepared for this. We're gonna be inundated with requests. We need to support those that do. Again, we as doctors are used to acronyms, APR, abortion pill reversal. So we do that in Eugene. I know William Toffler does that up in Portland. That is gonna be more commonplace because there are gonna be numerous women who are gonna take the abortifacient and regret it and request reversal. So we, the church, need to be engaged in this. So that's after Roe. And then briefly, I just wanna say, next slide, don't forget the men. The men are involved. I know our pregnancy center has a mentorship program for the men involved in these women's lives. Churches will jump at this opportunity. Believe me or not, churches will jump at the opportunity to mentor men who are involved in the abortion issue. And next, the top 10 ways churches support Dove. All right, so this is just, I asked my CEO to come up with this list, not necessarily the correct order. Collect baby bottles, and again, you can take them to your Bible study, put cash in them. It's a great way to collect money, coins, dollar bills. Take them to your place of business. Wherever you work, wherever you live, in your Bible study, collect those baby bottles and take the cash to your Pregnancy Resource Center. Take a life tour, get to know your Pregnancy Resource Center. We do life tours every month at ours. Send notes of encouragement to staff. Write them a letter, write them a note. Volunteer. You know, we have one small group Bible study that comes in once a month and does a deep clean of the whole center. We also have Bible study groups that come do maintenance. Collect maternities and baby clothes. Your church, I know, will be for that. Do practical support. Offer patients rides and meals. Let the Pregnancy Resource Center know that you and people within your church are available for that. Attend their events. They do fundraisers as well. Again, advocate for the family in our culture, donate money, and pray for the staff. Now, I think one of the greatest oxymorons of our Christian heritage is just pray. All right? When someone says that, I get a chill in my spine. There's nothing more powerful than prayer. All right? The scripture is full of prayer, and I'm going to end with a slide on that. The reason it's an oxymoron, I'm not military, so I apologize to anybody that's military. We talk about military intelligence, so you understand what an oxymoron is. Well, whatever. There's another great oxymoron, and it's a gentle orthopedist, all right? So the other great oxymoron is just pray. There's more. Prayer is powerful. So time. Are you willing to give? Are you willing to serve? Are you willing to commit? Are you willing to engage? Before this last one on prayer, I'm just going to share two other ones. Here's from a quote from an abortion provider. This is in the state of Virginia. I still practice part-time at a hospital doing deliveries. I think it's great to be able to do births and then get back online and do an abortion case. I love that. I love that balance. It just feels like I'm really able to meet people's needs for their reproductive health. So that is a twisted mind. Our goal of the church is to solve those twisted minds, all right? And they're twisted in the healthcare profession as any other institution, all right? So that's the role of our church. We need to be ambassadors for Christ. So this is the last page of the book, Tactics, and I'm not going to read the whole page, but he talks about being an ambassador for Christ, and the summary is know the truth, push yourself beyond your comfort zone, live out the virtues of a good ambassador, and then lastly, with God's help, go out and give him heaven. All right? So prayer, I'm going to end in that. Luke 18, I'm not going to read it, but again, Christ is teaching his disciples how to pray, and this is the parable of the widow who's pestering the judge and continues to pester until the judge gets tired. Again, I think what Jesus is trying to convince his disciples, pray diligently. Don't stop praying. Keep praying. I love that parable that he gives. This is the prayer that's listed in every module of Bridging the Gap. Pray for the Holy Spirit to empower you and others to understand truth, to articulate truth accurately, to live truth with relevance according to the scripture, and to be a light in this dark world. I try to pray that for myself almost every day. I would encourage you to pray it for yourself frequently. So let me just, again, I'm going to read This is from 2 Timothy chapter 2. Refuse foolish and ignorant speculations, knowing they produce quarrels. Again, we don't want to get in a quarrel with anybody, all right? But we do want to have discussions. The Lord's bondservant must, again, this is Paul teaching Timothy, the Lord's bondservant must not be quarrelsome, but be kind to all, able to teach, patient when wrong. Do we do that in the pro-life movement? Many of you do that very well. I need to teach myself to do that. With gentleness, correcting those who are in opposition. Now, why do we want to correct those in opposition? Here's the reason Paul gives Timothy. If perhaps God may grant them repentance leading to the knowledge of truth, that they may come from their senses and escape from the snare of the devil, having been held captive by him to do his will. You know, we're dealing with prisoners of war out there. That's how I like to do them. They're prisoners of war. They're captive to the evil one. We need to view them as such. We need to rescue them because they are controlling their thoughts and their hearts. All right, Jim, you're up.
Great job, Brick. Thank you very much for that. I was asked to become a part of this seminar because I was a pastor for 18 years and a youth pastor for 6 years before that, and I might be able to lend some perspective to how to, one, speak to your pastor about engaging the church in the pro-life movement and other related issues. I can speak to what it looks like for a pastor to take the lead in getting his church or her church involved in pro-life activity. So that's what I'm going to do. I'll talk to you about how to talk with your pastor if you want the church to be more active, and I'll give you some examples of ways in which a church can do that, and then we'll do some Q&A. I'll have you come back up and we'll field some questions. So first, let's talk about how to talk to your pastor about engaging in the pro-life issues in the church. And I'm going to go ahead and use the basic outline that Josh Brom set forth in a little document you can easily look up. I think I even put the footnote in your handouts. You can see at the bottom of the page. It's called What Every Pastor Can Do to Prevent Abortions in Their Congregation. And then I'll kind of jump off from there just a little bit from my own experience. So the first thing he says, if you're not satisfied with your church's current level of involvement in the pro-life movement, and I'm not going to ask for a raise of hands for how many of you feel that way, but if that's the case, what do you do? You're going to talk to your pastor, but one, have the conversation in private. Go to his office, have some coffee with him or something. Don't do it in the foyer after church. Or worse, before church. That's known as an ambush. I've had people, I've got a million things on my mind. The message is on my mind. I'm fully focused on those things. And somebody comes out of left field with an issue and maybe some, terse way that they put it. And it can be so jarring that it ruins your focus going in. And your pastor's not likely to respond positively to that. So sit down and have a nice conversation. And do it privately, not in public, because your natural tendency in public is to be at least somewhat concerned with how you're coming across to not just who you're talking to, but to the other people who might be around you. And there's more potential for defensiveness and not wanting to seem like you're being corrected and taken to task by a congregation member, frankly. Secondly, come to the meeting with humility. If you are a pro-life activist, it's very easy to come on too strongly to your pastor. If you're coming to your pastor, you might have an attitude like, well, I'm really involved and I'm hardcore, but my pastor is a gutless wonder over there, afraid to offend everybody and apathetic about the lives of the unborn and, all sorts of negative assumptions. And guess what? If you think those things, that will show up in your attitude, your tone. And your pastor has been doing nothing but reading people for years, right? He's going to read you like a book. And that is going to put him or her on the defensive. Are you with me? So don't do that. come with some humility. He might not be engaging the issue because he's overwhelmed. He has a lot of plates to keep spinning all at once, and he goes to this plate and that, and just there's a lot going on. And then he's got you as a pro-lifer, but then how about this person over here who wants women's ministries to be doing that over there, and men's ministries, they need to go to that retreat over there. And then he's got the youth program. He's got she has got a whole lot of plates to spin. So you can be overwhelmed. Maybe he thinks of the pro-life issue as more political than pastoral. We'll get back to that in a minute. Or maybe he just doesn't think the church can make much of a difference. Now, you're making some arguments why the church is the most important institution, even more important than the other institutions that we typically think should be taking the lead on this or something. No, the church should be at the front of that. So he might be thinking, no, this is too political. Oh, I'll give you another reason that some pastors may not engage the pro-life movement much, is because they may not really think the church can do a whole lot about it. This was years ago, about 15 years ago or something. I was pastoring my church. I'd been in there several years. And I was doing yet another annual, January Sanctity of Life Sunday sermon. I always talk about the pro-life issue come, around January 22nd every year. And I was giving another message on this. And that's just it. I felt like it was just another message. Nothing ever changes. Oh my goodness, we're doing all this stuff, but it's not making any difference. We live in the one state of the union that has zero restrictions on abortion. All the others have at least one or two, or some of them have a whole bunch of them. Zero in Oregon. And I was getting more and more frustrated with this. And the next thing you know, you've seen people pound the pulpit, right? Have you ever seen a preacher uppercut the pulpit? I uppercut my pulpit, and a chunk of plexiglass came off of that thing and began to careen in slow motion through the air in the general direction of my drums. I said mine. They weren't the church's, they were mine. And these are top of the line, Pearl Masters Custom, beautiful maple finish, just like Bonzo's. Any Zeppelin fans out there? And have I told you about my cymbals? I love my cymbals. Peisty signatures. Oh. And it's careening in slow motion towards my drums. And it landed just short of my bass drum, okay? And I breathed a sigh of relief. And I looked at the congregation, and they just sat there in stunned silence. And a teen girl leans over to her mom and says, "Is Pastor okay?" And she said, "I'll get back to you." I got frustrated because I was losing hope that we were going to make any difference. Year after year, no restrictions in Oregon. Roe still stands. 930,000, give or take, unborn children dying in American clinics every year. And I was losing hope that, not hope in God. I know Jesus is going to come. He's going to resurrect the dead. He's going to renew creation. There's going to be justice, peace, and unity on the earth, like kingdom come on earth as it is in heaven. I know that. The ultimate thing will work out. But what about now? What about anything that actually relies on the church? I'm a pastor of a church and I'm losing hope in the church? That's crazy, right? But anyway, we don't have time to psychoanalyze and fix me right now. The point is, some pastors do not engage because they don't think it's going to make much of a difference. And then 2010 happened. Remember 2010? Midterm elections. A lot of pro-lifers were in power. I'm not talking about Washington, D.C. They're still kind of a junk heap over there in 2010. But the state houses and the governorships and pro-life restrictions began to be signed into law. Everything from parental notification laws to, abortionists have to have admitting privileges at the hospital, the emergency rooms, to, the gestational restrictions, late-term abortions are being limited, pain-capable, babies can't be killed, and Pretty soon we're getting heartbeat bills. I mean, and last count was somewhere around 490. It might be over 500 restrictions that have passed on abortion just since 2010. Are you with me? It was sort of like God listened to this little punk preacher losing hope, and he just laughed up there in heaven and said, look at this fool. He has no idea what I'm doing. He has no idea what I'm capable of. But the renewal of my hope led me to further involvement in the pro-life cause. Since then, of course, I became a pro-life apologist, finished my PhD, wrote, about in defense of life in my book, The Real Royal Family, and got involved in the board of, Oregon Right to Life just recently. But for me, hope propelled further action, whereas lack of hope kept me less active than I should have been. And I think that might be the case for some other pastors too. So you can acquaint them with some of the reasons for hope. We've got a lot of work to do, but here are some reasons for hope that we're actually going to make a difference if we engage further. Now, furthermore, you might just want to say something like, I'm not here to lecture you. I know I'm active in this stuff. I'm really passionate about this stuff, but I'm just concerned about the fact that 1 out of 4 women are going to have an abortion. And I know that I look at our church and I know that some of them are sitting here. They may not say it, but they're here. And a third of the women who had abortions were churchgoers at the time. And if your pastor's like any other pastor I know, his or her eyebrows are going to shoot up off their forehead, right? A third are churchgoers? Are they listening to anything coming from the pulpit? Well, okay. So now your pastor is interested in this issue because now there's no escaping the fact that there are people within his flock or her flock that are dealing with this issue. So you can ask this question: how can our church prevent women from having abortions, right? How can we prevent that? And your pastor will probably care about that. He or she may not want to change the law, but may want to at least pastorally help the ones in his church affected by this. How can we come alongside those who are pregnant in a way that helps them to choose life and avoid the further pain of abortion that they'll experience for the rest of their lives? How can we help those who have had abortions find forgiveness, healing? Okay, because post-abortive women and men, we might add, have some emotional issues, guilt, shame. Some of these, when they're surveyed, say that they don't really believe God forgives that sin because they've never heard their pastor directly say that God forgives the sin of abortion. Can you believe that? Wouldn't you just assume that it's not the unforgivable sin? And yet they assume that they can't be forgiven when they can. So what are they doing? That stunts their spiritual walk with the Lord. Okay, 3. Ask if there's already a church policy on what would happen to a woman in the youth group if she became pregnant. Would she, for example, be kicked out? Now, if not, if she wouldn't be kicked out, do people know that she wouldn't be kicked out? That's a really important distinction because she might be treated well, but if she thinks otherwise, now that becomes a reason she might choose abortion. She doesn't want to be found out for, being pregnant out of wedlock. If the policy is to kick her out of the youth group or, take away ministry opportunities or things like that, ask the pastor to reconsider such policies because those policies drive her closer to abortion, not farther. You'd think there'd be an incentive for her not to have an abortion, but it drives them towards abortion, the fear of what will happen. What will the church do? What will they say? What will my family do and say? Those fears can drive them to abortion. 4, make it clear that what this pregnant teen is imagining would happen is probably a lot worse than what would actually happen. So your pastor might say, well, we're gracious. We're all sinners. We would accept her. But what if she is sitting in the congregation and doesn't think that's what would happen? Because she hasn't heard the pastor say, okay, if we had a pregnant teen in our church, here's what we would do. We would come alongside, we'd walk this walk with her. Maybe, we would, we've got this pregnancy resource center liaison that would take her to the center. We've got this, baby showers. We would do these X, Y, and Z, okay? And we wouldn't kick them out. If she's never heard that, then her fears of the unknown, even if unfounded, could drive her towards abortion. So, you might also, number 5, tell a story. Anna was 21 years old. She was nearing the completion of her college education. She was dating her boyfriend, and she was deeply involved in ministry at her church, okay? Had been a Christian a long time. But she took a pregnancy test, and it was positive. Now she had a choice to make. She was not married to her boyfriend, so, oh my goodness, what's going to happen? She ends up going to a pregnancy resource center and talking to Shannon, a client advocate. And she tells Shannon, I'm seriously considering having an abortion. And she said that because she's afraid of what her parents and her friends and her church will do. Now, it turned out that Anna's test was a false positive. She was not actually pregnant. But isn't it something that a church person that involved in ministry and everything else was thinking about abortion out of that fear? And ironically, Shannon knew the pastor from her church and knew that he was not only pro-life, but he was very compassionate, and that he would never have done all of those things that she was afraid of from the church. Now, how many of you think it might make a difference, in Anna's case, if she had been reassured and certain that she would have been supported rather than thrown aside in that situation? Do you think it might have made a difference to her? Now, multiply that times all of the unwed, pregnant women in our churches, and think about what if there was some kind of a movement where pastors essentially signed a pledge to talk to their churches once, twice a year, and change the policies and make the policies public, to look their congregations in the face and say, this is what we're going to do when girls get pregnant in our church, and this is what we're not going to do. Think, thousands of churches representing tens of thousands, hundreds of thousands. What about millions of people? All of a sudden, the abortion in the church problem begins to look much different, doesn't it? And that's why Equal Rights Institute and Josh Brom have tried to get people to sign the pastor's pledge, and I would encourage you to look this article up because there's a link to the pastor's pledge there. And you can acquaint your pastor with that, and he or she may well be interested in signing the pledge and making your church a strongly pro-life church in those ways. 6th, present this as an opportunity for the pastor to be able to say something about abortion in a way that shows how much he loves his flock. Again, instead of portraying it as we need to jump into the political issue, which I think churches do need to do that. But this is building common ground with a pastor who primarily wants to pastor people. And you're appealing to the pastoral part of his or her nature in this particular approach, okay? And that's the camel's head in the tent, in a sense. That's a start. You're going to care for the people involved in abortions and hopefully speak a pro-life ethic. And then, once your pastor engages in those particular ways, it's more likely that he or she will engage in some other ways as well and encourage the church towards increased involvement, even politically, right? 7th, offer help. Offer to help with practical stuff like throwing the baby shower. When people used to come to me and say, Pastor, our church should be doing X, Y, and Z, and I think it's a pretty good idea, I just said, tag, you're it. Because you got the passion, you got the drive, Pastors can't do everything. They shouldn't do everything. They should equip people for works of service and then release them to go ahead and do it, right? And that's leadership. That's developing leaders. And I was excited to develop leaders. That's not just something I did to get out of work. It multiplied the effectiveness of our church by releasing responsibility and authority to other people who were already passionate about that area. And boom. So offer assistance with things like that. And again, now with this, okay, throw a baby shower idea. The first objection people typically get about this idea is, well, if you throw a baby shower for an unwed mother, doesn't that communicate approval of premarital sex? Well, let me ask you something. Does celebrating the birthday of a child born out of wedlock celebrate fornication or the child? So why should it be different with the shower? You're celebrating a child. We're pro-life, right? Celebrate the life, not the exact manner in which the life was procreated. Are you with me? Okay. So it's about framing the issue. Now, also, if this happens in a church that preaches a biblical sexual ethic, which nowadays is becoming a bigger if, but if that happens, then you're less vulnerable to this possibility of having a mixed message about sex. Does that make sense? Okay. A couple more things. I can say these things fairly quickly. On a different question, if you are a pastor, whether here or, of course, some pastors may watch this on the video once it's uploaded, what are some additional actions to help your congregation address pro-life challenges? And I wanted to address this as a pastor who's done some or all of these things. One, preach biblical themes such as the cultural mandate. You guys all know what the cultural mandate is? Genesis 1:28. God bless them. God creates Adam and Eve in his image and likeness, male and female, and then he blessed them and said, be fruitful and multiply, fill and subdue the earth, and rule over the animals. The cultural commission grows out of this. Now, there's a chart that I'm going to ask them to fast forward to for just a second here. This chart is the cultural mandate through Scripture. What I just quoted to you from Genesis 1:28 is the most oft quoted, echoed, alluded to, developed, and tracked Scripture in your Bible. I defy you to find another scripture that's quoted as often as this one. It goes through the creation covenant, the Noahic covenant, the Abrahamic covenant, the Davidic covenant, and the new covenant. I would love to spend several sessions on just this, but I can't. I'm just tossing that out there. That is one of the most neglected subjects in evangelical preaching. I don't know I've been out of the Catholic Church a while. Maybe they talk about it more there. But in evangelical circles, we're so spiritual, we don't talk about fill and subdue the earth so much anymore, that's a serious biblical problem in my estimation. But if we preach that, not because we want to address sex and pro-life, but because it's in the Bible and you can't understand the Bible's unfolding story without understanding something that's clearly a thread that connects all of Scripture in a vital way. And how many people really understand that? I got a PhD in part because I see gaps in what the church knows and does and teaches. Not only neglecting truths that we sort of know, it's more like sometimes we don't know them at all, or we think we know something quite contradictory to this. But that's another subject. That's for another day. How about we speak about the image of God? It just so happens I've conveniently written a book about what the image of God means and tracked some of these kinds of issues through the book. It's available out there. Shameless plug, I'm sorry, had to say it. But it's called The Real Royal Family because I believe that being royal sons and daughters of God, given a creation mandate, sort of like a family farm project that we're doing with our Father, is essential to what it means to bear the image of God. And that's the proper, strong foundation for human, sacred, equal value. And that other theologies of the image don't ground value quite as well as that one does. But I'll just leave that to your reading pleasure. Also, two, make persuasive apologetic arguments for the pro-life position from the pulpit and teach congregation members to do likewise. I have always believed in using apologetics, and I still get resistance from lay people and sometimes from pastors about the value of apologetics. They say things like, well, you can't argue people into the kingdom. Well, you know what you can do? You can clear away their facile objections to the faith. You can put a pebble in their shoe, right? They're not quite as confident with their non-Christian worldview anymore because you've asked a question they can't answer. You don't have to know everything, but you do have to know one thing they don't know to put that pebble there. Use apologetics in the pulpit. I did this shamelessly all the time. I probably overdid it, but the church underdoes it, so I have to compensate for them. That's kind of how I look at it. I know it sounds a little like Rush. I don't have to give equal time. I am equal time. Finally, teach civil dialogue principles they can use for evangelism, pro-life apologetics, and other controversial issues. I would love to talk more about that, but we've lost the ability between right and left to have civil, rational dialogues. We're losing our tempers, we're cutting each other off, we're not listening to each other, and then we're not working things out, and we're on the verge of, I don't know, hopefully not a civil war, but man, it feels like it sometimes. We've got to relearn civil dialogue. Okay, looks like we've still got 10 minutes. We could do some Q&A maybe, possibly. Okay, let's do that. So if you have any questions, Sam will rush over with a mic so that our listeners to the video will hear the question, and then Brick or myself will address that question. I see a hand back there.
I know, I gotta be fast.
Thank you. You said you were going to speak to the political side of the issue with pastors?
Yes. Oh, yeah. I'll just say this. I think what I would do to encourage a pastor to get political from the pulpit, first I'd define what I mean. I don't mean endorsing candidates. Not just because I'm afraid of the Johnson Amendment, which has never actually been used to take any church's tax-exempt status away, I should note. But it's not fear of that. It's that I do think I'm not really okay with endorsing candidates per se. And I really don't love even the idea of directly throwing in a church's lot or the church writ large's lot with a party, because then you end your possibility of ministering to people from the other party. And it's not as simple as parties anyway when you really look at the numbers and converse with people from the Democratic Party. You find people more sympathetic to pro-life stuff. What I would say to the pastor is I would cite those 500 or so restrictions on abortion since 2010 and say, listen, if it didn't make any difference, this last 12 years would look a lot different, and there'd be a lot of unborn babies more dead because those restrictions were not passed. It is working. Our incremental approach is working, but we've got a lot of work to do, especially in Oregon. I would say something along those lines to give them hope. Okay?
I would touch on that in my church, certainly I don't encourage, in other churches I get to speak in, I certainly don't encourage them to a political party or a candidate, and that's certainly CMDA's perspective. But we ought to be actively involved in issues that become before the legislature, both locally, statewide, and national. I think it's important for the church to do that. And I would say, unfortunately, and Jim, if you want to comment on that, when I bring that up to different pastors, there's some responses that I get. And as you know, in Oregon, there are some very important bills that come up that truly have a moral issue involved. You know, some are amoral. In other words, there's not really a morality with it, but some that truly have a moral issue involved. And the response I typically will get is, the people in my church know how they already believe on that, and they believe correctly. And the second is, those that are young to the faith, I don't want to scare them away by discussing these issues. I think both what we need to do as pro-life people is to convince our pastors otherwise. First of all the people in your church, if you're not teaching on these issues regularly, I will guarantee you the people in your church are getting their information from sources that are not very accurate.
That's right.
All right, they are getting theirs, particularly our young people, all right, working on college campus. They're getting their information sources that are not reliable and not credible and actually wrong information. And those that are new to the faith ought to know how to believe on these issues from a very scriptural point of view.
That's right.
So we need to come alongside a pastor, pay for them and pray for them, encourage them to think otherwise.
That's right. It's called discipleship. And we have to teach the Bible. If we taught Genesis 1:28 through Scripture, like I was talking about the image of God, we taught these things, pro-life is unavoidably a part of that. Be fruitful and multiply, and we're going to take the fruit of multiplication and abort it. So discipleship, exactly right. Do we have other questions?
Yeah, is there a study for that cultural mandate that we could use in the church, or some Bible study or something like that?
I should have mentioned where I got the framework for the chart, because then I started building on it, and I didn't get it in my book because I came up with it about a month after I sent the final version. But the original chart began with something that Greg Beale wrote. He wrote a 1,000-page book called The New Testament Biblical Theology. That's a lot to chew, for sure. But he's probably done some stuff that's a little bit less verbose or whatever. But there are other I'll say this. Dominion and Dynasty is just a couple 100 pages long by Stephen Dempster, where he discusses those kinds of themes. There are definitely people who are N.T. Wright. How many of you have ever read any N.T. Wright? Read his stuff. He's always talking about the royal concept, children of God, kingdom, dominion, all those things. Lots of great things to read about it.
And also just again, sorry, and I get no royalties behind this bridging the gap. I was put in charge of 40 different bioethicists and physicians and other ethicists around the country to create this curriculum. It took 3 years to create. I was just put in charge of it. But if you go in the beginning of life module, one of the questions early on is, what does it mean to be Imago Dei? Not all of those, Jim, but a lot of those scriptures are listed in that answer. There's a ton of scripture, and there's additional references to go through. It's a robust curriculum. If you go to CMDA's website, which you should be able to just onto for free, you should be able to see a lot of these references. I will also mention the Colson Center just came out with a book last year. Larry, what's the title of it? It's the Imago Dei. It's something like it's Be Made in God's Image. Great little booklet of what that means. So there's lots of material out there. It's great to do a Sunday school class. I think it's a great topic for a Sunday school class.
Yeah, it's necessary for that.
Okay, we have a couple minutes left, like 3 minutes. Is there one more question?
I've heard this from friends and other congregations in my town, that their pastors were not speaking out on being pro-life because they were afraid of how that might affect their collection basket, which just broke my heart. So have you heard anything of pastors being resistant because of feeling they might offend someone?
Yes, I'll touch on the verse. Yes, it breaks my heart too, and I do hear that. I've heard that, actually, I want to say many times. I've definitely heard it from different churches, and it breaks my heart because it's not true. God, we are called, again, let me go back to my beginning. We together, we advocate. So Jim's got his church, I go to my church. We're part of the church, all right? And if a pastor doesn't have, how do I say this gently? If a pastor doesn't have the perspective, they're not a member of the church, I'm not sure it's the church to go to.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Christ, the mystery of God's will is to unite all things in heaven and earth under one head, Christ. Unity in the earth is more important. We think that's some leftist theme, but it's right out of the Word of God. But pastors do care not to drive people out of their churches, not to drive away seekers. And The good part of that is that you want more people to stick around long enough to hear the gospel and give their lives to Christ and engage in discipleship. The downside can be the fear of driving people away, can keep you from addressing important issues and not discipling your congregation. So sometimes you can just look at the negative side of that and not see their positive pastoral concern behind it. But there is a positive pastoral concern too. They're trying to reach people and not drive them away. But sometimes they get afraid. And I don't think it's primarily about money. I think it's primarily about winning more people to Christ and building the church, numerically. In any case, there are ways to address that. Like I said before, I mean, if they've got all those people in their congregation, you've already been through it, they want to care for those people. That's why I sort of recommended you approach it from the pastoral rather than the political angle initially.
I think the churches that grow are the ones that allow people to ask the difficult questions and have discussion. The church should not be afraid of letting people ask very difficult questions and having open discussion.
That's right.
I'm a firm believer in that.
That's right.
Okay, I want to say thank you. This was so fun to watch. We are at 4 o'clock, so there's a 10-minute break, and then I think the final general session is here, so you can hang out for 10 minutes or go grab a glass of water. Thank you.